Okie dokie. I think we're about ready to get started here, y'all. Are y'all ready?
We are.
Ready? Okay, fantastic. Alrighty then. So just to introduce myself, hi everyone. I'm Lauren Nye. I'm the president of Kennesaw PRSSA, and today we are talking about traditions and trends in the PR industry. So we have two lovely guest speakers here today who are just seasoned pros in the PR industry. They know the industry in and out, and one of them likely looks pretty familiar to you all, Debbie Wetherhead. So and then Leigh, some of you may not know, but Leigh was actually one of our panelists for our event at the PRSA Georgia conference last spring. So a familiar face as well. But without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to these ladies. So how about we go, we'll go Debbie and then Leigh in terms of order of questions. And the first isn't even a question. It's just tell us about your background in PR and what you're currently doing in the industry.
Great. Hi, everybody, and thank you for having me join the panel this evening. As some of you may know, that for the last 25, 30 years, I ran Wetherhead Communications, a local public relations agency, and we were fortunate enough to represent some of the most well-recognized brands in the world: Coca-Cola, Cox Automotive, there's a little Cox family there, and even NASA. And then about 6 years ago, I joined the faculty here at KSU and taught PR writing, PR cases, and PR principles. And then this past summer, I retired from teaching, and my new job title is Family Vacation Planner.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. Okay, and Leigh, tell us what you're doing in the PR industry.
Well, I hope to follow in Debbie's footsteps sometime soon. But yeah, so I've been in the industry for 20 plus years. I started out, and I have to say, I talk to so many young professionals, and they oftentimes have done so many other things other than public relations, which I think is kind of a trend. They study one thing and maybe they gravitate over to comms. But that's all I've ever done is comms. I'm rather boring that way. I graduated with a degree in that area, went on. My first job was to work at a public relations agency, which I highly recommend. I just felt like it was a really good training ground to get to work on a lot of different clients at once. And then I went into politics. I worked for a lieutenant governor as his press secretary, and then was the district manager for a congressman, and then did a little stint in nonprofit and found my way to corporate public affairs and never looked back. I've been with Cox Communications for about 20 years. We offer a high-speed broadband internet connection across the company. Our parent company is Cox Enterprises, which has also, what Debbie mentioned, Cox Auto. So if you think about Kelley Blue Book, Cox Automotive. So I'm delighted to be here and feel like I'm happy to share what I know.
Awesome, ladies. Thank you so much for giving us some insight into your experiences in PR. And I'm very excited because I feel like this topic is going to help us to deep dive into your true thoughts and feelings about how the industry has changed over the last few years, where it's predicted to go, and what we're going to get ourselves into when we graduate. So with that being said, the first question is, what are your top 3 traditions in PR? These can be tools, lessons, rules of thumb that have remained the same during your time in the industry. And like I said, let's do Debbie and then Leigh.
All right. I got the questions in advance, and being the good student that I like to be, I prepared my answers, and I'm going to focus on what I consider rules of thumb, things that are constants that have existed through my multiple decades of practice, and then more recently, my observations as a professor. So the first thing, and if you ever took PR principles with me, you've heard this before, but the first thing is we all in public relations need to learn how to speak business. We need to develop business fluency. We have to understand what those folks at the C-suite, with those folks that have the seats at the table, how do they think? How do they talk? How do they measure? We have to train ourselves to kind of fit into their world, because what they value may be slightly different than what we perceive we should be valuing. So we have to learn about what our organizations do, how they do it, what it takes for them to accomplish their mission and goals. We have to then be able to clearly explain things. And so starting by understanding the business that you're in, even if that's not for profit, then that is one of the constants or the rules of thumbs that I prescribe to. The second thing that I want to reinforce is any time we work in marketing communications or specifically in public relations, internal or external, you got to know your audience. And so invest your energies in research, in relationships, and in engagement. Once you've started down those paths, then you'll be in a better position to make strategic and tactical decisions and execution. And last but not least, I know that our students here get very jazzed by crisis communication, and they want to be involved in social media, and that's all great. But don't forget what I consider to be a cornerstone of public relations, which still is media relations and publicity. We just have lots more tools and lots more venues and lots more outlets that we can use. But that still is, as I like to say, a cornerstone, a foundation of the kind of work that a lot of PR people do. So those are my 3 rules of thumbs of kind of don't forget. Leigh, what do you think?
Well, I have to say, Debbie, the business aspect and having some business savvy, understanding the business that you're in is so key. And I can't tell you so many times, and I've been guilty of this myself. I will say, I don't understand the numbers. That's why I got into public relations, because I don't want to deal with numbers. Well, that only gets you so far, because eventually you really have to understand a P&L. You have to understand how the business operates. So I definitely concur with that. In terms of some of my trends that or kind of staples, I think, of the profession, one is storytelling. You have to have a passion for telling stories, and that's been a constant. What I think has changed is now there's so many different ways that we tell stories. When I first got into the business, I often thought about the written word, and I can remember writing lengthy pieces for newsletters, and we hardly do anything now for the written, formalized, printed. It's now digital, and being able to tell a story in a visual way is so key. So really storytelling, that's fundamental. The tools that we now have to tell stories have definitely changed. And then another one that I would touch on is data and knowledge. It's so important to what we do, understanding why something may be working on social. I hear a lot of young people, they want to go into social, they love social, but you have to have metrics and really be able to understand why something is working on social and why it's not. And I think you have to get people like me to believe in spending money on social. And a lot of executives in the C-suite, they think it's a nice to have, but they may not understand how it really works to build trust. And you do have metrics that show that. So being metrics driven. And then again, in the area of knowledge, being knowledge based, what we do is not knee jerk. It's not feel good. We do it because it feels good. You have to have some backing of it. And the more you have knowledge, the more you can become more of a strategic counselor to executives. You know things that they don't because you've got your ear to the ground. You understand the social issues that are going around. And that helps you to be more than a tactician, but really a counselor to executives. So those would be my couple.
Awesome. Thank you so much, ladies. That's fantastic. I know for those of us who are in internships or are lucky enough to have jobs right now in the industry that we want to be in, I think we can definitely relate to that, especially the storytelling. That one that hit true. Okay, so the next one, flip it on its head. What are your top 3 trends happening in PR?
So when I originally saw the list, it said things like trends or, where we thought things were going to go, or lessons. And so my comments are going to focus on lessons, things that I do see coming in the future based on what I've experienced in the past. And the first thing is kind of a mixed bag of good, bad news. As the 1992, you don't remember that, election occurred, the mantra back then was, it's the economy, stupid. So yes, the economy and the mystery of where it's going and when it's going is going to impact all of you as you look for internships, as you look for your entry-level jobs. And the bad news is we may see some, as we already are, see some corporate entities and not-for-profits cutting their staff, cutting their internal resources. But my experience tells me that that sometimes is good for agencies, because organizations still need public relations, but they can't afford to pay the full-time employee benefits, FTE benefits. And so what happens is they then turn to outsourcing, and that means many times they're going to agencies, or occasionally they're going to freelance relationships. And so for those of you that are interested in that side of the employment equation, it can mean that there will be more job opportunities, not less. So that's kind of something to bear in mind as you move forward. Speaking of getting those first jobs, it's demoralizing, I know, for many of my former students when they look at requirements that say 1 to 3 years experience or 3 to 5 years experience for entry-level jobs. What I always say is take that in stride, and before you graduate, start gaining experience through internships, and then go ahead and figure out how to get certified on certain softwares and certain programs, and start to build those technically years of experience even while you're still a student. And further, I know many of my students had part-time and full-time jobs. I'd like to encourage those of you in that situation to start to learn how to tell your own story and to showcase how the skills and the expertise that PR people need, how you utilize those when you worked in retail and food service and you were a nanny, and all those times you needed project management, you needed to be flexible, you needed to be organized, you needed good communication skills, particularly verbal ones, you needed to show how to manage expectations. So yes, you don't graduate with that technically 1 to 3 to 5 years of experience, but arm yourselves with things that can make you maybe skirt some of those requirements. And last but not least, something that again used to come up a lot in my classes that I think is lessons learned is that businesses are expected to kind of lead social change. That has not changed in the last half a dozen years as I've been tracking the Edelman Trust Barometer. And of course, this week, if you can say Adidas and, look at what happened in the news headlines, people are expecting businesses to do more of the right thing. Social change is on top of everybody's mind, and things to look for as you move forward in your career will be to be paying more and more attention to those situations and maybe those opportunities. So those are my 3.
Wonderful. Thank you. Okay, Leigh, what are yours?
Well, I'll build on the job front. And this isn't, I guess recent is kind of how where your perspective is, but a lot of times when people are considering to get into the profession years ago, I think that they were attracted by crisis communications and some other more traditional. But what I've noticed is more corporate companies putting a premium on communicating with their employees. That seems like it's employee comms, internal comms is a lane that has just, flourished. I think companies are finally getting the message. You keep your employee base well informed, create happy employees, and they usually create happy customers. So that's a growing area. So I would consider for all of you, as you're looking, what are the different tracks that may interest you? Think about internal comms, because I know my internal comms department has gone up considerably, and that's just the type of company we are. We value internal comms, but so job potential there. And then I know this isn't a recent trend, but for someone like me who's we'll say more seasoned, that you have to be digitally literate. That's probably the biggest trend that I've seen over several years. So now you really have to be able to, my team they have software where they can create a short animated video. They can help executives do really good looking videos right out of their phone. They can move video. That's my biggest concern. I create videos and then I can't move it because the files are too big and I'm literally like screaming. But they have this expertise, and that is where it's going. And the good news for many of you, I think, you've grown up in this world of very digital and you're used to and comfortable. So capitalize on that, because I know sometimes I feel like a fish out of water because I don't do it every day. And then I was just going to talk a little bit about, when I first started my career in public relations, we were so reliant on the news media to get our story out. Well, now the world has changed. There are so many avenues for companies and products and brands to tell their story. So yes, we still do a lot with journalists for sure. And that earned media component is big. But now in public relations, we buy certain types. It's not advertising, but we buy social media influencers and other ways to talk to our target audiences, and our own channels, our own websites, and the channels that we have are now vehicles. So I think that's a really positive trend. We still deal with the media a lot, and we do kind of live and die by what they say about us. But now the great news is there's all these other channels where companies can get their message out. So knowing all those channels and making sure you're leveraging them is an opportunity. And the good news is for you, I think many of you, you're not bashful about media and using the media at your disposal to tell those stories. And that's a real plus.
Absolutely. Thank y'all so much. That's definitely encouraging to know going into the industry, that we may already have the tools in our back pocket. So thank you so much for that insight. That's awesome. Okay, so the next question is, do you believe that traditions and trends vary across different PR industries, like nonprofit, agency, entertainment PR, so on and so forth? And if you believe or don't believe that they're, varying, why or why not?
Okay, I'll go ahead and get started. I follow my rules. All right, I believe that practice fundamentals of PR is universal, and that should be consistent across all different sectors or forms of employment. However, there are some different roles that PR practitioners have to take on, and different environments that call for different skills, use of different tools, and different protocols. So I'll give you some examples. So as you hopefully my students recall, publicly traded companies do have to adhere to different rules and guidelines. They have to adhere to regulations set forth by the Securities and Exchange Commission, and they have to meet regulatory requirements, documentation, and protocols. Whereas a privately held company like Cox is not necessarily held to being quite as transparent with, say, their numbers. They certainly are when it comes to their culture, but there's a difference when you are working for a publicly traded company or a privately held firm. And then not-for-profits in the same vein, they have to adhere to a whole different set of regulatory environment factors. Speaking of publicly traded, a lot of PR people who are not afraid of math will pursue a career in investor relations. And they have to, again, understand the SEC environment. They have to understand finance at a much greater level than the general practitioners that I have typically worked with. And then there are certain specialty industries that, from my vantage point, require specialists. Technology, healthcare, pharmaceuticals. These are very fast evolving, changing sectors. And you really need PR pros to stay right on the edge of knowing what's going on, what's changing, and how to adapt and meet the needs in those particular environments. So yes, the constants are, the fundamentals are the same across corporate, not-for-profit, and agency, but sometimes you get into some specialty roles or some specialty industries that require some different things.
Wonderful. And Leigh, what are your thoughts?
No, I agree. And I'm just trying to think of something that wouldn't be repetitive. The only thing I would say is that I feel like the basic tools, especially if you're entry level, you still have to be a really good storyteller, no matter what position you're in. I think having your finger on the pulse and knowing what's going on, that's all remains the same. And then if you A nice thing about if you were considering your first job at an agency is that a lot of times at an agency, you're given like 7 different accounts to work on all at once, not hopefully by yourself, and that really gives you a nice, exposure to a lot of different industries. And then you can kind of figure out, well, what do I like to do? And then you could kind of move into that particular role or industry. And then you really need to learn all the nuances that Debbie was describing. And the only thing I could think to add too is that if you work in different segments of the business or of the industry, for example, nonprofit versus corporate versus political or something else, the only thing I would notice in my career is that sometimes the budgets are different. So in corporate environment, I feel like there's a lot more money to spend. And in some respects, that makes it easier. But in a nonprofit, you might be able to pursue your passion. Like maybe there's a cause that you really want to pursue that makes you happy. And you can apply your PR skills to that. Oftentimes, not all the time, but in a nonprofit job, it's a great learning ground. And you learn to do a lot on a shoestring budget. So that would be the other thing to consider about the different facets of what we do.
Awesome. No, thank y'all so much. Yeah, that's fantastic. And it's kind of funny, that question, because so many of our guest speakers that come into our meetings, they're from all different sectors. So it's nice to know that there are fundamentals all across the board, and then there are niche rules and regulations and different traditions and trends. So awesome. Okay, the next question is, how have changes in societal trends changed the skills or experience required of an emerging public relations professional?
Well, I'm going to start out my answer to this question the same way I did the last one. Fundamentals are fundamentals. So some of this is going to be consistent across all industries, all sectors, all roles, and the way that we deal with societal trends and hot topics should be consistent. Again, however, the speed of how fast news gets circulated and information is shared, the speed of digital platforms, the increased two-way communications, all this interactivity. Old school was we just push stuff out and force-fed our target audiences whatever we wanted to say. Now we embrace and empower people to communicate back and forth. That changed a lot of things. And of course, today's division in our society and a heightened awareness about social issues and about differences of opinions does kind of supercharge everything. So with that, I say that PR people, some of the skills and expertise they need to go into the business knowing or embracing how to use is how to track and analyze what's going on. What are the trends to see what they need to kind of be aware of. It's almost a little bit like Crisis 101. What's going on and what does it mean to my organization? After that, they need to be, PR people need to consider the corporate social responsibility role or stature that their organization has taken. Where has your company or your organization put a stake in the ground? And how does that relate to what's happening on the social horizon? When you look at these things, you have to balance your corporate or your organization's needs. You have to think about your internal stakeholders. I'm totally on board with Leigh with what you were saying before about internal comms and how important that is. And then you also have to be sensitive to your external stakeholders. Then you have to consider, how does this align with the brand? So you track the issues, you analyze them, you look at how they marry or align with what your organization wants to stand for, and then you move forward in engagement as it is relevant. So it's not just like tools or skills, it's kind of a mindset that I'm trying to suggest that our students and soon to be full-time professionals start to think about employing.
Sure. So then just follow up. So if you're recommending, staying on top of like what is going on in the news, how it applies to your company, how it affects you as a PR professional representing an image, what would you suggest, like news sources, social media, say something like Ad Age? What where would you
So it's
suggest?
read, read, read. And you know what? You don't have to do it all on your own. I get emails all the time because of being a PRSA member. You know, there are companies that are selling software that media maps. A few years ago, we had a speaker come into KSU from Google that broke down all the behind the scenes data stuff that Google can tell us as PR people what's trending out of newsrooms. Of course, paying attention to news feeds, but even going old school and talking to your call center personnel and seeing what kind of things are coming in on social that are raising alarms, that are trends, that are repetitive comments, you know, setting up a system where you're monitoring many different key inputs. And then again, seeing how they match up with what your company does and what it's all about and what it wants to portray itself as. So there's a lot of software, there's a lot of programs, but it's having some natural curiosity and liking to read and knowing what's going on. And you cannot get all your news from Twitter or TikTok. I'm sorry. Just have to say that.
Thank you. Keeping it real, y'all. Awesome. Okay, Leigh, what's your perspective on societal trends affecting the industry?
Yeah, so there's a couple of them, and just as Debbie said, speed is probably was my first thing that came to mind. That there is no longer the luxury of time in a lot of instances, and the problem with that is that a lot of times if you're in a crisis, I'll give you an example. So we're a broadband company. If some construction crew cuts our line and there's an outage, and a lot of people now don't have an internet connection, you know, on the one hand, you might say, well, I mean, it's not like you're doing surgery or something. It's not that big of a deal. But nowadays, if you read the research, people will say, you know, their broadband connection is as important as like sliced bread and oxygen. So it's important. And so the line's broken, people are down, they have no internet service, the media is banging at your door. What happened? And a lot of times it's complicated as to what happens. I may not know that it was a construction crew. I don't know what happened, but yet they want something quick. And so you have to balance that need to get out there and say something without saying so much that you have to correct, because I've been in so many situations where you think the situation is one thing and then it kind of evolves over time. So I think the speed at which we have to respond is critical. And so how do I prepare for that? I have crisis plans, I have template documents. You know, it's not the first time we've had an outage. So, you know, I could tell you, no matter what the details are, I can have a holding message that gets me by. So I think that's no luxury to kind of hang out. You got to be quick. That's a kind of easy one. The other one is the social issues. I think you're absolutely right. When I first got started in the business, I'm not sure people really expected my company to take a stand on social issues unless it was core to my business. But now there's this gravitational pull that something happens big on social, something happens big in the media. What's your stand on it? And it's a difficult issue, and it is not for the faint of heart. I think you really have to be very, very careful about what you're getting involved in and making sure that it aligns to who you are as a company. Because the worst thing you can do is kind of go out there and say, yes, we're all for this diversity inclusion issue, whatever it is. And you make a big, bold statement about it. And then your employees start looking around saying, diversity and inclusion, but look at our upper leadership ranks. We don't have much diversity and inclusion. And then your own employees are calling you out. So speed is king, but you want to be right when you take a stance on social issues. But that's definitely something that is now, you know, Debbie, part of our bread and butter. We have to think about that all the time. And I'm not sure years ago it was that way, but now the trust barometer shows that people have less confidence in the media, less confidence in elected officials. So now they're all looking to CEOs to figure out the world. And that puts PR people in a really difficult but prominent position. It's good job assurance because they have those difficult issues that they're going to need us to help them through. And then I would just say now more than ever, because of those social issues, our jobs to be well read, to have our finger on the pulse, to be able to guide our companies and you know, the likelihood, I call it the, you're going to offend somebody, the offense factor. Like you have to really, anything you say, you have to really take a step back and say, all right, who is this going to offend? Because right now, half our companies, half our world is divided. So you used to take a stance on anything and you can almost guarantee that 50% of your customer base will disagree with you. So finger on the pulse, knowing how issues are going to go down before your company comes out and says anything. Those would definitely be a few of mine.
No, that's wow. Thank you so much. That's awesome. Yeah, no, it got me thinking, like from what I've personally read, so I'm Gen Z. I would imagine most of you in the room are Gen Z. I've read personally that Gen Z tends to buy products or services from companies that their values align with. And they will just as quickly cancel or dismiss a company that they disagree with. Have y'all seen that aspect at all in the industry?
Absolutely. There's example after example of poorly conceived advertising that has backfired. A Jenner handing a can of Pepsi to the frontline cops, not a good move. So sometimes people, even in trying to do the right thing, they're not thinking, as Leigh said, they're just not thinking it through. And part of our job as PR practitioners is to be a little bit of the doubting Thomases, to constantly say, but what if? And for us to play through these different scenarios so we can be good counselors to our management team and show them, what the range of possibilities might be, whether we want to jump right in or we want to do watchful waiting. But our counsel has to be mindful. We have to really think things through.
Yeah, and I would agree, Lauren, you're absolutely right. There is a very dominant or growing segment of the population that cares about not only your product, but what you stand for. They want to know that you as a company are about something more than the almighty dollar. Mm-hmm. And so I think that that's really key. And it's a great way to build brand trust if you can be able to share that, yes, we're in the broadband business, but we also care about the environment. We're in the broadband business, but we also really care about making the communities that we serve better places. And so we're contributing in those ways. And and employees, I've seen this more and more. Your employee base wants to see that they work for a company that stands for something more than just making a buck. So it's a win-win in my estimation.
Have you all found that, like being Gen Z, like if there's a company that sends out a message that either you like or dislike, that affects how you view the company from going forward? A lot of nodding heads. Okay, awesome. All right. So our next question here is, how long should you wait before having your company or a client jump in on a social media trend? Kind of in line with what we were just talking about.
It's a perfect segue. So my answer has to be, it depends. And so there's a lot of things, as Leigh was saying, we don't always know as a situation presents itself. We don't always have all the facts. And particularly if we want to label it a crisis or an incident, it's often evolving as we are being called upon as PR professionals to kind of throw a stake in the ground, to make an opening statement, to, set up a position. So I say that at the beginning, when you're first aware of a situation, you have to be very strategic and you have to decide the relevance of that situation or opportunity to your organization. Again, goes back to, how does it align with your organization's mission and goals, your employees' point of view, your external stakeholders, its impact on business. And then you have to kind of stop and say, well, what happens if we do nothing? What happens if we stick our toe in the water? What happens if we, seize the moment? And there's good and bad, there's risk and reward in all of those scenarios. And a solid PR counselor looks at all the different opportunities and risks and then provides counsel. And finally, if we go back to like PR theory, like the stuff that we have to do in our classroom, not necessarily in the field, the 5 levels of social media engagement always start with listening. It's not jump right in. And unless your brand has a lot of social media presence and has a brand personality that matches or aligns with what the situation is, as a PR consultant, I would start to say, let's slow down, take a breath, look at the risk factors versus rewards, and then say, is listening and watching enough, or do we need to engage?
Yeah, I agree everything that Debbie said. So I'm trying to think of something that's not repetitive, but that's so spot on. The only thing I will say is that there's tremendous pressure from your employee base, because now there's these advocate groups within your employees, as well as your external offices, audiences constantly wanted to draw you into issues, because no matter what issue there is, there's at least a mighty group that feels that it's important and they want to pull you in. And sometimes you might think, well, what's the harm of putting out, a post or a tweet that says we support or we object to something? And I will just say that speed is important, but you always want to make sure, in addition to what Debbie already said, that you have some street cred. So if that post is the first signal that you've ever given that you care about that issue, that's kind of whitewashing. You're just being opportunistic. You really, I would say that in a lot of cases, is this your issue? Is this issue that you've already donated money to, that you've already shown that you care about beyond a post or a social media, tweet or whatever you're going to do? I think that's really important. It has to be really aligned with your values and something that you're working on, and you've got a good track record on that issue. I think that's really important, because more and more we're seeing companies get called out because their big proclamation on social media does not fit their actions, and people are not very tolerant of that. And the other thing is, as you jump in, you do it in a way that maybe supports the cause, and is not look at my company. You put the spotlight on your company, and aren't we great for supporting this? And look at how much money we've given to this cause. Turning it on yourself as some type of PR play, I think is bad. I think you want to truly be doing something that actually supports the issue and is material in some way. And again, I can't stress this enough, I think you have to have some street cred on the issue. You've done something other than just tweet about it.
That makes sense. So really making sure you're being authentic and genuine with your message if you're going to jump on it.
That's right. And so we're out on this diversity and inclusion issue, but let me show you, we have ERGs where we talk about this stuff on campus, our employee resource groups. We've given money to support things in diversity and inclusion. We've had all our executives go through diversity and inclusion training. We track how many women and people of color leaders that we're pulling into our business and promoting. So that's what I mean by street cred, that you're actually seriously doing something that goes beyond a post that's just meant to show the world that you're doing something. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Those
absolutely.
are great examples.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Now, here's the thing. I'm watching the time, and something that we always do is we open up the floor to our people in the room, our lovely people on Zoom. So there are 2 questions left. I'm going to narrow it down to 1, and I'm going to switch the order for a second, because Leigh, if I have your permission, can I please share my screen of your LinkedIn to talk about the PR trend that you wish would disappear?
Oh yeah, sure.
Okay, wonderful. So we saw that you reposted our question, and I'm gonna have to flip screens for a second. Okay, here we go. So we saw that you had posted this with this question, and I read the comments today and I was like, this is gold. This is awesome. So I would like to hear from you before we, and Debbie, before we go through kind of what your network said about the PR trend that you wish would disappear. So
I'll go fast and I'll turn it over to Debbie, but yeah, just to give you I don't know if you saw it, Debbie, but just give the highlights. So we said, what trend do you want to go away? And one of mine was when executives come in and they say, we need something and we want you to make it go viral. Make it go viral. And I'm like, nobody knows exactly what's going to go viral. So that's my pet peeve. Another one of my network said that, she's tired of everybody coming in and they're working on their respective projects or product, and they think everything demands a press release. You know, everything demands a press release. Those were a few I was trying to, yeah, that's right. And this is a good one. Executives saying, we need to PR this, and just talking about it's it's a practice. It's not, you know, like a tactic and all the time. It's, you know, so anyway, I'm trying to remember some of the good stuff people came up with, but there was a lot of fun stuff that we wish would go away. I forget what mine was. What was mine? The stop telling me, make it go viral. And then, oh, the spin doctor stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, come in, we got this challenging thing, and you're really going to have to spin this. I don't think of myself as a spin doctor. If you're doing PR well, you're really thinking about mutual beneficial partnerships. How do I develop partnerships with our customers, with our community, with the media? It's not about, I'm not in there to spin. I always detest that. So anyway, that was a few of them.
Absolutely. I laughed so hard when I saw the not every event warrants a press release, because my boss is gonna love that one. I gotta share that with her. That's awesome.
So Debbie can relate to this. Sometimes you get people who want publicity and they want a press release, and they just think their project is the most newsworthy. And sometimes, Debbie, you got to tell them their baby just isn't pretty.
That's awesome.
I enjoyed your post with my coffee this morning. Yes, I thought that was brilliant that you asked for feedback, and I too enjoy some of what we collected, some of what you were able to garner. Yes, not everything does deserve a press release. That is definitely very true. And educating the people that pay our wages that's not always the right strategy is a challenge. The one thing, and I only have one that I kind of thought was what I want to see disappear, is people's lack of understanding of what is public relations. And I came across a survey from LinkedIn, I guess last year, and it said that public relations is one of the top 10 most misunderstood professions. And I won't bore you because we're running out of time with lots of reasons for it, but I wish that PRSA and those students in this practice and professionals in the field would kind of do more to proactively try to help broaden people's understanding of the good work that we do and the value that we bring to our organizations.
True.
Awesome. I think that just struck some inspiration. We're gonna have to talk about that at our next board meeting now. How are we gonna get people to know what PR actually is?
We're not party planners. Yeah, we're not party planners. We're not spin doctors. So that, and everybody thinks that they can do public relations. I hate to tell you that, but when you get into the profession, you'll see, I don't know why, like if you're an accountant, you don't have people coming into your office saying, let me show you how to do accounting. But for public relations, people think they're better communicators than they sometimes are. People think that they can write sometimes better than what they can. And they most certainly know how to put together a really good glitzy PR campaign. So that's the other thing. They don't know what we do. And a lot of times you get a lot of unsolicited help. You're getting the jaded side now. That's probably not good for students.
Oh, I love it. Keep it real. That's awesome. All right, y'all. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to the floor. So does anyone have a question that they want to ask Leigh or Debbie? One of y'all better come up here.
Don't be shy.
Okay. Okay, then in that case, do you have one? Yeah, come on up. So y'all have been coordinating with Vernicia, and Vernicia is going to come up and ask a question to you.
Okay, hello. So basically something I was thinking about was the fact that at one time social media was just a trend that everyone thought was just going to disappear or wasn't something to take seriously. So I was wondering if you guys are thinking or you know of any trends today that might take off and be just as taken as seriously as social media that are around today.
Metaverse. It's a big question of whether or not this will actually turn into something that marketing communications professionals need to embrace. People are like chomping at the bit to try to figure it out so they're prepared and maybe a little ahead of the curve. But then a lot of us are still very, not sure what it is, how to use it, if it will ever come to fruition. So I think that's the next kind of big thing that may or may not turn into, like, social is just, a constant part of what communications is about today. Don't know if the metaverse will turn that way or not.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because I don't have anything that's going to be as big as social, but I do think the metaverse, and we're still trying to figure out this collision of our real lives in this digital atmosphere. And I'm sure you've seen, I mean, brands are hopping on it. You can buy a Gucci bag, you can buy, all these high-end brands that are, a digital likeness, and they're getting people to do it. I mean, it's going to be amazing. And I think, just looking, because we're in the technology field, you look at what's possible with the metaverse and all the things that we're going to be doing. I mean, we think we know smart homes now, but the smart homes of the future, it's just going to get even more spectacular. So I think there probably is something in the metaverse, and we're going to have to figure out how we use that as a really good tool to help our customers. And, I don't know. And then you ask people what they think it is, and you get different definitions. So we've got a ways to go, but that is exciting opportunity, I think, for sure.
Thank you.
Thanks, Venetia.
Hello, I'm
Hi.
Shakayla.
Hi.
So I was just wondering if I know throughout college, I've heard that it's good to be good at journalism and writing, but it's also to be skilled in advertising and digital media. But then I've also heard you really need to understand people. So psychology, which do you think is best to just have little bits of all of that, or cater more to a more partnered area field with PR, or what do you I don't know how to
because I kept stealing thunder. Leigh, please go ahead.
Well, I would say all those skills that you mentioned are so important. So the writing and getting back to the storyteller, that just transcends. If you can write well and speak well in PR, you're going to go further in industry no matter what. That's a good skill. So I do think it is a mix of all those things, being a really good communicator, both the digital or written word, and being able to present yourself verbally. Emotional intelligence, when you start to get into what they're, reading people and understanding people and getting into the psychology, that's a big part of what we do. So I think having a good grasp on those foundational issues, you don't have to necessarily go deep on everything, but I do think many of the things that you described are the building blocks. And if you get a well-rounded, really solid education in those, then you can build on an area and expertise. So if you decide the social or the digital, then you can start to layer on specific training, which, by the way, when you land a job, general PR job, maybe the company might pay for you to go learn other things in that one track, but then you can kind of layer on the more specific skills. But I think a good solid foundation, writing, speaking, being very self-aware and understanding how to read people, I think that's a great foundation that you can build on. Debbie?
Totally agree. Two thoughts for you. Number one, bad for you guys is that your future employers are going to demand a lot more skills than old school used to demand. In the past, when I was coming up in the Atlanta agency world, we used to get to hire videographers and hire art designers and hire people to do a lot of things that today's employers want people straight out of college to be able to use lots of tools, lots of software, lots of skills. So they expect you to be able to, like Leigh was saying earlier, make the video, design the newsletter. So you have to have a real broad base of skills. But to answer your question, again, I agree with Leigh. If I had to say one thing to focus on, or if you have any extra classes that you can take, journalism and writing. The more that you know how to tell a story and you know how to approach it from different angles, whether it be a feature story or an old school press release or a social media campaign. But good writing is good writing. And so that's where I really say, if you have extra bandwidth or you have an extra class or two that you can still get in your curriculum, the more writing experience you can get, the stronger it'll make you in your first few positions.
And wherever you go, that will serve you well, whatever you decide to do.
Mhm.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
All righty, ladies, thank you so much for answering our questions from the floor. I think I can speak on behalf of all of us when I say we've so enjoyed having this conversation with y'all. Y'all have given us so much insight to the industry, how it's been, how it's changing, what to expect. So thank you so much for your candid responses. We really appreciate it.
Sure.
At this time, would just putting this out there, would y'all be willing to either drop your LinkedIn or in the chat or give us the permission to search you up on LinkedIn and connect with y'all?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Love it.
Awesome. Thank
Love
y'all so much. So if you want to drop it in the chat, I've got the chat screen pulled up so people can just get that, and our Zoom peeps can get that as well. So wonderful. And then after we do that, we usually do a group picture. So if you would just smile pretty for your computer cameras, we'll grab a picture. So wonderful. Thank you so much, Leigh. Awesome. Okie dokie. So then let's. Why are you laughing? Oh, okay. Oh. Okay, so then do y'all want to go ahead and come up and we'll get that picture, or if you want to go ahead and take a picture of the screen, please help. And then y'all know Professor Wetherhead, and you can snag her email from us and whatever stuff. Okay, why don't we come up and we'll grab that picture. And just so y'all know, I am gonna go camera off on here, but I'll be up there, and yeah. And just so y'all know, we have recorded this meeting, so this will be posted on our YouTube. If you would like, we can share it with you. You can share it with your networks, whoever.
Yeah, definitely share it.
Wonderful. Okie dokie. I'm gonna go jump into this picture, and you'll hear, yeah, people on Zoom, if you want to turn on your cameras, we'd love to see you. Thank you, Chandler. So then I'm gonna go ahead and get in. I'm gonna go camera off here, and you will hear Dr. Weed say, "What?" Great. Oh, yeah, sure thing. Okay, there we go. Did that work?
Awesome.
Okay, great. All right. We'll see you in a bit. Okay.
All right. 1, 2, 3. PRSSA. Perfect.
Excellent. Oh, okay, no worries. Okie dokie. Debbie, Leigh, thank you so much. I hope you all have a great rest of your evening. We so enjoyed this conversation. Thank you for sharing your experiences with us and your insights. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Nice to meet you, Debbie. Bye-bye.
Bye.